As I've kind of teased up till now, today we're going to be learning all about using Google Analytics 4 as your e-commerce analytics tool, both for tracking, reporting, all of that stuff. Mike will take us into some more in-depth, detailed reporting looks as far as orienting yourself in Google Analytics 4 and understanding what you're really looking at when you're in the platform.
So in terms of orienting yourself in GA4, what you see when you look at reports in GA4 may not be exactly what you expect it to be. And so what I want to point out in this section is the things that you really need to expect going into GA4 that I think will help you really understand your data a lot better and make decisions based on good data, not looking at the wrong thing. So the first thing that we'll talk about, and this comes as a surprise to a lot of people, the session counts that Julia was talking about earlier. One of the other reasons that they can vary a little bit from Universal Analytics is that they are actually estimated session counts. They're estimates of unique session IDs that are generated. So they're supposed to be good estimates, plus or minus 2%. And so for most reporting and things like that, they're probably good enough. However, if you're doing more granular, deeper analysis, you really need the actual data set, not estimates. If that is the boat that you're in, you will need to connect your GA4 to BigQuery and pull your analytics data from BigQuery. And we'll be talking more about some of the differences between BigQuery and the data that you get there versus some of the other places in Google Analytics 4 in a little bit. The next concept I think that's really important to understand is what we call the areas of GA4, right? So if you've gone in there and played around with things, I'm sure you've seen, here like we have on the left-hand menu, you can get into standard reports, which is kind of where more similar to Universal Analytics, you go in, you pull up a report, you look at it. There's also exploration reports, which is the custom reports on steroids, I guess you could say, a lot of different tools in there to utilize to analyze your data. You might be pulling your data via API into Looker Studio or some other tool, or as we alluded to earlier, you might be pulling data from BigQuery. The important thing to know and why it's important to understand each of these as different areas is depending on where you are and where you're looking at the data, you may actually see different data where you expect to see similar data, right? So one example would be in exploration reports. Those are much more likely to be sampled data than what you would find in your reporting, in your standard reports. Or if you're looking at BigQuery, like we alluded to earlier, you're not going to have the layer that Google Signals puts on top where it's connecting users. So your user counts in BigQuery are actually going to be different than what you would see in the standard reporting section or in the exploration reports. This might be something that you've run into as you've poked around your accounts and your properties in Google Analytics 4 is thresholding. So I guess you could call thresholding the new sampling. If sampling was ever a problem for you in Universal Analytics, there's still some sampling in GA4, but as I mentioned, it's mostly from our experience in the explorations versus these standard reports. However, thresholding can really throw a damper on things where it's withholding essentially some of your data. So let's say you're looking at a channel, a user acquisition report, right? And you're looking at channels that sent traffic to your website. Some of the ones that didn't send very much traffic might get grouped into an other category, and they're just not shown in your report. In fact, some of the metrics aren't even there to be calculated, et cetera. So if you are seeing this and you do need more granular data and really want to see as much as you possibly can, we have a fix for you on the next slide, and that is to change your reporting identity. So in the admin section of Google Analytics 4, you have the ability to change what Google calls your reporting identity. And this essentially is how Google identifies users. There's 3 different methods to choose from. Google provides a description of each one. So blended is the default when you have Google Signals turned on. And it's going to use all these things that you see listed here to try and, again, figure out, hey, is this user coming from this browser, the same user that came from this phone browser, or whatever the case might be. Observed looks at a few less things than blended to try and figure that out. And then there's device-based. If you want the granular level data that you're looking for, you need to choose device-based, and that is going to ease up quite a bit on the thresholding. Most of the issues that we've seen with thresholding have gone away when we've made that change. The good news is you can switch back and forth, because when you do have device-based selected, you don't get some of the benefits that you would with blended. And if you're trying to do user analysis, for example, you probably want to make use of blended. But again, if you're trying to do real granular analysis, like a content audit for SEO purposes, then you're going to want to use device-based. Keep in mind, when we talked about those areas earlier, that your choice here will actually affect other areas, including the API, which is, of course, again, where Looker Studio pulls its data from. So, it's a little strange to be able to change a setting and have it, essentially change a report in Looker Studio, but that's kind of how this works. In addition, this will not affect BigQuery. BigQuery is kind of its own little thing. It's lean of these things, if you will. And so, it's not going to change anything that happens over in BigQuery. The next thing you should orient yourself around is channel groupings, and specifically the default channel groupings in GA4. The first thing that you'll notice is that there are now a lot more channels available than in Universal Analytics, and some of the channel definitions have changed. That means, for example, that you may be expecting to see your traffic show up under a certain channel, but it actually ends up showing up under a different channel. And up until very recently, we did not have the ability to create custom channel groupings to change some of those definitions and get it to look more like what we would expect. But now, as of a couple of weeks ago, we do have that ability. And so you can create your own custom channel groupings and modify some of the rules here. I would definitely suggest clicking on that details and definitions link. You'll see this table that we have here, but also Google really gets into the specifics of what qualifies, for example, as affiliate traffic, what qualifies as organic search traffic, so on and so forth. Definitely worth really familiarizing yourself. So again, you know what you're looking at here in GA4. And lastly, in this section, we'll talk about the attribution model. So you do have the ability, like in Universal Analytics, to choose the attribution model that you want to use. Unlike Universal Analytics, data-driven is the default attribution model that shows up in GA4. That, of course, differs from Universal Analytics, which use the last-click non-direct method. And the other thing that you should know here, probably not surprising, hopefully at this point, is that what you select here only applies to some reports and other areas of GA4.